Hey guys, this is TV Siblings Podcast for Mr. Robot. This is Sid.
This is Waitha.
And this is Harini.
We have everyone in the house for
Yeah.
this episode. This is episode 5.
Episode 4.
Episode 4, titled
Not Found.
Not Found. Not Found. Let's just get some quick thoughts before we jump into the recap. What did you guys think of the episode?
Why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I think Swetha wants me to start just because I think I'm the only one who liked the episode.
Really?
I loved it. I absolutely loved the episode.
He has
I'm
even
so
gone
surprised.
so far as to say this is one of his favorite episodes
What?
of the whole series.
That's what people are saying is like probably the best episode of like the entire show.
I don't know if it was the best episode of the entire show.
But it's up there, according to Siddha.
Or up there, yeah.
I just thought it was like a really beautiful episode. I thought the way it was written, I thought the cinematography
Yeah,
and
I agree with
the
that.
lighting was incredible. It was just so, it felt like a painting at some certain points.
Yeah.
This was a character episode. The plot did not move too much. If that's what you were looking for in this episode, it did not happen too much. Although I do think there were some details that we're going to talk about that are going to have a huge impact to the story moving forward. But I viewed this episode as two things. Kind of a deep breath before you jump into the deep end of the pool and take the plunge. Because I think from this point on, it's going to move at a super fast pace.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not going to have a lot of time for just these moments to really get to know our characters or see them, grow and, develop. And I think the purpose of this episode is to get the characters positioned mentally and physically in certain areas in the story to help them prepare for what's coming up next. And whether that's certain interactions, I think particularly between Darlene and Elliot, I think it was a 2-part process from when they kind of are starting to work together again to now where they have that more of an emotional bonding that needs to happen. And they both kind of arrived at that conclusion in 2 separate ways, which we'll get into. And then, DDP, I think it was more of a continuation. Maybe there's some criticism that maybe some of her scenes were not needed and repetitive because we already know she's in a bad place.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think there's some details in there that are important to get her to reinforce that she's at a point where she's at her breaking point. And this is like, I think, at the end of her line. And I think she's going to be given an opportunity to do something different and take some risks and maybe do something dangerous that could risk herself and her family and go against Dark Army. I think she's going to take that risk, which up to this point, I don't think she's been willing to do that or willing to take that risk at all. But yeah, I loved the episode. I really did.
I will admit that I only watched the episode once, so I don't think I was able to really look into the deeper meanings of the episode. But it was a little slower. It was definitely not what I was expecting. Like based on the previews from the previews of this episode from last week, I was like, oh my gosh, so much stuff is going to happen. I'm so excited. And it was completely not what I was thinking it was going to be. It did remind me a lot of season 2, where this episode was very metaphorical. And there's a lot of nuances to it that I may not have understood. And that was a big thing for me. I think a lot of the scenes I know had a lot of a deeper meaning to it, but I wasn't able to catch that on first watch. So hopefully you guys can illuminate to me a little more.
Yeah, I was telling this to Swayth that this episode reminded me quite a bit of, if you've ever watched Mad Men, there was the episode called the briefcase episode, where Peggy and Don kind of bonded as they tried to come up with a brief for Samsonite. And it was a very self-contained episode, which was really kind of showing them in their strongest and most rawest emotional state, and realizing that they both are like Don says to Peggy, "You're the only person who really knows me." And then Peggy kind of understands that she sees Don for who he really is. And it also reminded me of the Breaking Bad episode, The Fly, which it was just a self-contained episode of Jesse and Walter White, where they're just trying to kill this fly, but it's really just a story device to get them to confront their own issues that they're having.
Right.
And I think, what was the third example? There's a third example that it reminded me of.
Well, definitely the Sopranos episode with Christy and Polly trudging through the snow. Amazing episode. And so yeah, maybe I'll share my thoughts. And I don't know. I don't mind character development episodes at all. I think one of my favorite episodes of Mr. Robot is the episode with Elliot and Trenton's brother,
Mm-hmm.
where it's just a beautiful episode, just very, very poetic. And same with the episode last week, where, was it last week that Elliot goes on the date with Olivia?
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that episode. I thought there were some really heartwarming moments, and we really get to know Elliot a little bit better. And we keep talking about Elliot healing, and I thought like a lot of that happened in that episode where he was in touch with his human self again. For some reason, the interactions this episode, they just fell a little bit flat for me. I guess I just wanted a little bit more. I think that, you know, a big point of this whole episode is sending off for Wellick. And I just felt like some of the conversations that they had, and we'll get into it more, I think Sidha has some really good insight into some of the conversations, but I guess I just wanted a little bit more in terms of the character development. One thing, and we'll talk about this later too, I think I just find it a little bit frustrating that Elliot keeps going from being more open to being completely closed off, and being more open to being completely closed off. And I think that, you know, when he's talking to Wellick later on, he has a moment where he opens up a little bit and is there for Wellick a little bit. But like I said, it just didn't really seem like enough for me. It felt like too little too late kind of thing. But Sidha had a really good point about that. You know, even Darlene says that, where in the phone call to Elliot this episode where she's super pissed off and just like cussing him out, she's just like, it's like, you know, one step forward, three
Right.
steps back.
Yeah.
And that's what it's felt like for
Mhm.
Elliot. And this episode felt like that kind of, there wasn't enough of that growth, but maybe that's just part of the story, that
Yeah.
Elliot is really, really walled off, really complicated, and it's not going to be a linear, you know, process towards healing for him. It's
Mhm.
going to be complicated and muddy and sometimes a little bit in the thick of it all, like this episode was.
Which I think makes it more realistic too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess I just didn't really enjoy this episode.
I agree with that. But we can get into it and discuss a little further.
So this episode had 3 different storylines, and I think it makes kind of the most sense to break it up into those 3 storylines. And so why don't we focus on Elliot, Wellick, and Mr. Robot as the first one. So the episode starts off with Wellick and Elliot at Elliot's apartment, right where the last episode ended, and they realize that there's the Dark Army, you know, guy in the van, and they have to deal with him somehow. Wellick ends up hitting the Dark Army operative really hard in the head, knocking him out, and Wellick thinks he's dead. And basically they immediately jump into the van and decide that they have to deal with the body some way. And then they're in this really remote town, you know, with the snowy woods everywhere. They stop to get gas, and the Dark Army operative gets away. And ultimately, the shop owner gives them directions, but they get lost in the woods. And that's when they really start to have more of these meaningful conversations.
Yeah, the only thing I would say about the opening scene is that the Dark Army operative was using Audacity to
No way.
to spy on
That's
Elliot and Wellick. It's funny to us because Audacity is actually the podcast recording program that we use. But he was
so
definitely
funny.
using Audacity. Yeah, I guess the other thing was like, what was Wellick's plan? Like, why did he drive out to that particular place?
Right.
I know he wanted to like burn the van, but how are they going to get back to New
That's
York?
so true.
Like, it just seemed very odd.
Or they weren't going to burn the van, maybe just burn him. I don't know. But they wanted to get rid of everything inside. That's right.
Yeah, he said check to make sure the logs are good, that he didn't send anything to Dark Army. If it's good, we're going to burn everything. It just seemed like not a fully thought out plan.
Is there a possibility that none of this happened?
I don't think so. I think that a lot of people were speculating, you know, is Wellick even really dead at the end?
Yeah.
I think he is. I think there was an interview with the Hollywood Reporter where both Sam Esmail and Martin Wallstrom, the actor who plays Wellick, talk about it. And Sam Esmail talks about how he really wanted this episode to feel like odd and alien, because that's who Wellick is as, you know, a character. He wanted that kind of
That's so
whimsical
funny.
aspect
Yeah.
to things. And Martin Wallstrom talks about, you know, his character, the growth of his character. And so I think that, I mean, the show could obviously surprise us, but at least the way they spent a whole episode on it, I think that he really did die, and that all of this really did happen.
And I guess a lot of the scenes I wasn't sure what their place was or what their role was for this episode and like the bigger meaning of things. You're looking at me so intensely.
Trying to listen.
But anyways, the lady was so goddamn annoying.
Yeah.
Oh my god. I really thought on first watch, well, I only watched it once, but when I first saw that scene, I was like, she's Dark Army. Like, she's
Yeah.
super weird. She's like taking them to a different place. It's not like what they want. I just felt really weird, but then it was clear that it wasn't the scenario that we thought
Right.
it was. But what was the point of that? Like, I don't get it. Were they trying to show anything? Was it purely for a comedic effect?
I think comedic effect. I think also to reinforce that again how stupid of a plan this was. Wellick is probably the most recognizable person in the world.
Okay.
He's considered the hero that saved
That's so true.
you know the financial world and the economy, and he definitely dresses a certain way every
Yeah.
time he goes out. So that makes him even more recognizable. I think that was important to just reinforce. It was kind of a dumb idea. And also that he was recognized.
Mhm.
And so that their options are limited.
Mhm.
Dark Army would figure out pretty quickly where they are. And so I think that was kind of the intention, as well as the comedic effect. I thought the scenes were funny. You know?
Yeah. No, it was definitely funny
Yeah.
and frustrating.
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit of karma, because it's possible that she intentionally gave them bad directions.
Yeah.
Oh, I think for sure
You
she
think
did.
so?
I think she says when you get to the creek, I think you make a left.
Yeah, something
I'm
like
pretty
that.
sure you're supposed to make a right, and it's 30 minutes.
Because that's why they looped back around.
Yeah, well, actually, maybe they never even got to the creek, so they never
don't
even saw it. So maybe she's, yeah, I don't know. She
There
took
was
them on the
no
wrong
creek
path.
or something.
But
Yeah.
I think she definitely did lie to them.
Okay.
All she wanted was a selfie with Wellick.
Wellick asks, so one of the big conversation is where Wellick asks whether Elliot ever thinks about running away, starting all over, leaving all the pain behind. And Elliot just straight up says no. And did you guys think anything about that conversation?
I think that Wellick was trying to find some common ground with
Mhm.
Elliot. I think he's always been trying to just connect with him.
Right.
Just find that common ground. And I think they talk a little bit more in the conversation where he talks about you wear this hoodie because you don't care,
Mhm.
but I care about everything and that's why I'm a failure.
Yeah.
And I think he's envious of him that he has his perception, and I don't think it's we find out later it's not entirely true, perception that he doesn't care about anything. And I think he wants that. He wants to not care what people think because he's constantly caring for what people think. He's
Mhm.
constantly trying to strive for not only acceptance, but praise
Mm-hmm.
and gratitude. He wants all those things. Well, Elliot doesn't care for any of that on the surface. And so I think that's what he was just trying to connect with him. And I think it was just, yeah, I mean, Elliot at that time had his front up and just was not willing to concede anything to him.
Which is funny because Elliot very much is the same as Wellick. You know, he does care so much and he would love to be accepted and be normal, quote unquote, whatever that means to him. But he just shows it in a different way. He shows it as like a recluse and like just avoiding everybody, whereas Wellick really wants to put himself out there as much as possible. They're just two peas of the same pod in that way.
Mhm.
And okay, so I think you were kind of hinting to this, Sweta, about the dialogue in this whole episode, especially between Wellick and Elliot. I think one part of why I didn't like this episode so much is the way that the lines were delivered. It felt very much like I was watching like a play or something, and they were just kind of saying these lines out loud to each other. I don't know if you guys, or I know Sweta liked it, but Sweta, did you feel that way? The lines were delivered slightly different this time around, and I don't know if I really liked it. If that was like a stylistic choice or something like that.
Like for everybody or just Elliot and Wellick?
I think
I think
just
Elliot
for
and Wellick.
Elliot and Wellick, because we'll talk about Darlene's dialogue later on. That felt very natural.
Yeah,
But these scenes in the woods, it just felt off.
it felt theatrical almost.
Yeah.
I think that's more the lighting and the environment, and they kept hearing this this creature, and then Wellick's like, it's the sound of death. You know, I
Yeah.
think it was just the environment. I thought their conversation was fine. I was even like funny at times, you know, when Wellick was singing that Swedish song, and he's like, "What is
Yeah.
that?" He's like, "Oh, it's about Christmas." It's annoying. Like,
Yeah.
Elliot immediately responds like, he just didn't. I think the biggest thing is Elliot, for the first portion of their walk through the woods, was insanely annoyed with Wellick because there was no reason for them to be there
Yeah.
outside of Wellick forcing them to be there.
Right. He forced the
And
situation.
it's like this was like so stupid in
Mhm.
Elliot's mind. He was just so irritated, just could not get past that.
Yeah.
And honestly, just didn't want anything to do with him.
Mhm.
And it was just more it was even more irritated that out of all the people he's stranded and lost with and potentially going to die with, it was Wellick.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I think the
Yeah.
other thing that, Siddha had a lot of insight about is I was like, why isn't Elliot being more forthcoming with Wellick? Obviously, like, he's annoyed and he doesn't want to be there, and he's not a fan of small talk, and he doesn't really want to have deeper conversations with him. But actually, one of the big reasons is the only interactions, for the most part, that Tyrell has had is with Mr. Robot, not with Elliot.
True.
So they actually don't have, they're basically strangers where they actually don't have anything in common. And so that's when I started to think about the episode in that lens, it made sense why there was a big distance between them and why the conversation really wasn't going anywhere,
Mhm.
why Elliot really wasn't engaging Wellick at all. But still, I still struggle with, like, really what was the point of all of these scenes and the conversation. But when we see them talking later on, I think the biggest moment where there's a little bit of a turning point is when Tyrell asks Elliot, "Did you ever care about me?" And Elliot says no, and Wellick is just basically just I'm gonna give up.
Distraught.
He just, sits down and says he's not going to go forward anymore. And Mr. Robot is the one that says, we can't just leave him to die.
Mhm.
And that's what makes Elliot, Elliot's really frustrated in this moment too. He's like, fine, just stay here then. Like, I'm going to keep walking. But then he realizes, okay, I can't just leave him to die.
Well, there's some things that Wellick was shouting at him that kind of got to Elliot a little bit. He was shouting at him as Elliot was walking away. Basically, do you hate me because I ruined your great vision, your great plan? It was a failure because of me. You really don't, he's like, you really think you could have executed without me? You needed me. And then he said, you're just so lost. You're so in your head.
Mhm.
And while that's happening, there's like a voiceover from Mr. Robot. And I think maybe you'll talk about it, basically saying the same thing. Sometimes we're so lost, we get lost within ourselves.
Mhm.
And we kind of hide ourselves from the rest of the world. And that's what Elliot has always done. That's who he is. And I think
Yeah.
that's part of this final season, the healing of Elliot. We've gone different stages of it in the first few episodes, and this is another stage where it's like Elliot needs to have some kind of come out of that shell to get to his true self.
Mhm.
The one who's supposed to sit at that table, with Magda and little Elliot and Mr. Robot. And to what you were saying, Swetha, all the moments where Wellick has bonded and connected with Elliot was actually with Mr. Robot, when he has that
Yeah.
conversation about his father. It was a very, personal conversation, personal story, and what drives him. That was Mr. Robot.
Yeah.
And that was something that Mr. Robot kind of understood. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, there's something here between us that we can connect with. He's only really had 3 interactions with Elliot. First time at Allsafe, the second time at Steel Mountain when he randomly ran into him, and I think the third time is when he broke into his apartment and it was the night of the hack. And he took him to the arcade, but then Mr. Robot took over,
Yeah.
right? And those are just 3 of the interactions, but very, very brief, to be honest. And Mr. Robot was working with him for months, right?
Mhm.
But Elliot, or Wellick didn't know that. He thought it was Elliot.
Right.
And I think to take it further, he was in love with the idea of Elliot and his visionary plan and how talented he was. But that person he's in love with was split into 2, and he's working with Mr. Robot, who doesn't give a shit about him. And Elliot doesn't really, I think he's more apathetic towards him. And so I think that's what was tough for Wellick. The person that he's in love with doesn't really exist, right? It's split into two different people. And what he wants is a combination of that person. But that doesn't exist yet.
I guess I just don't understand this entire conversation because they were talking about things that we already know. It almost seemed like they wanted to do this to get more character development, but I personally don't feel like there was character development because these were already things we already knew about the characters themselves. I think it was more for the characters to realize, but I almost don't want that or don't need that necessarily. Like, we already know that Elliot is like a troubled and broken person and is like very much inside of his own head and is like needs to heal and needs to process things, and he's not. And we know Wellick cares so much about what everyone thinks of him. We know he's kind of like uptight and super anal about like certain things and cares about Elliot and wants that acceptance from him and so on and so forth. But it was just like that conversation is being played out loud. I want to see the importance of it and like how it pushes the story further in terms of the characters, but I kind of don't see that.
So, I agree with that, and I think to add on to that, Wellick was clearly looking for answers, right? Like you were saying, common ground, but we literally just talked about the fact that him and Elliot don't really have common ground. Yeah, they're similar in certain ways, and we can draw out similarities. They don't have a connection, and I think that's what this episode drew out and made so obvious. And so what was the point of spending so much time with them interacting?
Yeah, so the point was not, it was kind of what you guys were saying, but it wasn't so much about Wellick. Mm-hmm. Wellick was a story-driven device to get Elliot to be at a different place. Okay?
Just a vehicle of that, yeah.
Correct. And that place was for him to realize, I have to help and save Darlene. I have to care. She is the one person who cares about me. Well, he says also, well, like, you're the one person who likes me or whatever. But she's the one person that's been like in all this trouble because of him, and he's been treating her like shit. And he's like, you know what? I know we're gonna die, but I have to keep going. I can't give up because, well, guys, why don't you just give up if you know we're gonna die? He's like, I can't because of my sister. Mm-hmm. I just have to warn her. I have to call her and save her. And you talked about there's no common ground. Yeah, I agree. There was no common ground between them. And it was made very obvious between Wellick and Elliot. But then Wellick finds that common ground. The common ground is, I'm going to help you save your sister. The thing is, Wellick just wants to feel useful to Elliot.
Yeah.
He loves him so much. He's like, I just want to help you. So we have something to work towards, something we can bond over, whatever, something I can help you with. And he realized this is what my purpose now is to make sure I get Elliot to somewhere where he can make a phone call to save his sister from Dark Army. Mm-hmm. And he was good to go after that. It's like, let's keep going. Like, he seemed like almost reinvigorated after Elliot told him that. That's what he wanted to do.
But see, it just feels like, okay, well, Tyrell was hopeless, and then he had one thing he could maybe do, and okay, he focused on that new goal and that new task. But I honestly don't think he cared about it so much, and I just struggle with the fact that Tyrell fell in love with this idea of Elliot. And clearly, the person that he sees in front of him is not who he thought he was, right? And so how could he still be driven by that love? And I don't know. I just feel like, oh, it just felt very convenient. Like, okay, now we have something to do, and it's not so pointless to keep walking. So let's at least try to do that. That's how it felt like to me.
I don't know if it's the love at that point. I think it's just more like I need a purpose to keep going. And this is a person I do care about, whether it's love or not. But this is someone I do care about, whether it's reciprocated or not. And it's not. Elliot made that clear, you know. But it's like I got to help him. This is something that's important to me, and I have to do this. And he makes it clear before he's lost everything. He has nothing, and this is the one thing that is allowed him to keep going. Otherwise, he would have just sat there and died.
I think that the one revelation, like you were talking about, that Elliot has is he can't just, not care about anybody else. And I think that that's the one revelation Elliot has this whole episode. He realizes how poorly he's treated Darlene. He realizes how poorly in this moment he's treating Wellick. And he comes out of himself. He admits, he confesses, I don't like being an outsider either, right? You have this idea of me, but I'm not this invulnerable person. But I don't think that this is something new. He's always wanted to protect Darlene. That's always been.
So it's different. It's different though. He says I think it was Mr. Robot's voiceover. He talks about how when you're searching for something, you lost something. It's always about your relation to what's lost. I can't find it. I can't find this thing. But you don't think about the impact for other people. I think that's his point. Up to this point, Elliot is like, I need to do whatever it takes to save and protect Darlene,
Yeah.
regardless of consequences, regardless of how it makes Darlene feel.
Yeah.
And how our relationship. If she hates me forever, but she stays alive,
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
But now he's like, that's not good enough.
Yeah.
She's my sister.
Exactly.
You know, she's my family.
Yeah.
I have to be better. He's like, I've been a terrible brother. I treated her like shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's caused problems and everything, but she's my sister and I gotta be better. You know? She's the only family I have left. And just doing enough to protect her is not enough. I have to be better. And I think that was a small step, but an important step for him to move forward.
Correct. Yeah. The exact quote that Mr. Robot says in the voiceover is, "It seems like when we lose something, we never think much about the lost." Totally to your point. Like, Elliot's been treating Darlene like crap, but understanding he's just doing it to protect her. But he never really thought about how he's actually making her feel and how lost and alone she feels, you know, throughout all of this. And I think he comes to that realization when he says that. But I think I'm glad he's come to this point. It just seems like a long-winded way to get there. And this is what we were talking about earlier, where it's not going to be linear for someone like Elliot. It's not going to be, you know, one positive experience lifts him up and he keeps going. It's like one step forward, 3 steps back. And I just felt like this whole episode was like a really long-winded way for him to come to that realization. Okay, he can't keep treating Darlene like shit.
Well, you look at the way the season started, and I'll take it at a very high level. Season started, he's not working with anyone, just himself, his own plan.
And Mr. Robot.
With Mr. Robot, he tolerates him.
I disagree. It's
not an equal relationship.
No, I think
Mr. Robot doesn't like the way Elliot's acting. He's reckless.
First season?
The very first episode.
Oh,
he thinks he's reckless. He thinks he's acting
This
dangerous.
season.
Oh, this season.
This season,
okay,
yeah.
okay.
He
this
thinks he's
season, I think that they're working together 100%, and I think Elliot thinks of Mr. Robot as an equal. I actually disagree with you on that. However, he's emotionally closed off, where he's not talking to him about emotionally what he's going through. And I agree with you that Mr. Robot thinks Elliot's acting reckless, but I think that they are both working together.
I disagree. I think he views Mr. Robot as a tool. I think it's nothing beyond that. In the first episode,
Okay.
Mr. Robot is a tool that he's using. You know, it's like, I don't want to deal with Darlene right now. Let's switch, right? You take over now. You handle this. It's not till I think actually the Olivia episode where they start to like engage a little more and talk with each other more. It's more cordial. So every episode's like a step. And then so the episode where Darlene kind of forces him to go to the bank and everything, then Elliot starts to work with her. But even then, it's again treating her as a tool. You do what I say, and that's it.
Okay.
Right? Everything's like slowly ripping the scar tissue off of Elliot and getting him to heal better. But it's very slow, very methodical. And so it's step by step. First, he has to work with Mr. Robot better. Now he's working with Darlene better. Then it's like emotionally understanding Darlene, emotionally connecting with her, emotionally understanding Mr. Robot. I don't think he's there with Mr. Robot yet because we're still talking to him. And at least he still has to heal with us. He doesn't talk to us anymore, right? So we're going to get that episode too, where he finally reconnects back with us.
Do you think he's going to ever understand Mr. Robot emotionally? They are the same person. Do you think that once Elliot understands himself emotionally and kind of lets himself be more open, that will naturally
I think so. I think so. Because right now, like, Mr. Robot, I think he views his job as to protect Elliot.
Yeah.
And oftentimes from himself, right? I mean, Mr. Robot is the voice of reason so far in this season.
Which is bizarre.
Yeah.
And then, once I guess Elliot and Tyrell are in agreement again, Wellick agrees to keep going to help Elliot, and they ultimately keep walking, and they find the Dark Army operative who shoots Tyrell, and then Tyrell decides to walk off into the woods to help Elliot and basically give him a chance against the Dark Army, and his parting words are, you know, please take down White Rose, like, do this.
Yeah, so
What the hell?
yeah, and so I don't know if we can talk about it.
I guess one last thing, just to finish off the scene.
Yeah, the final scene.
Tyrell walks into the woods, and then he sees this, like, blue, glowing object.
And he's a little bit of a smile on his face.
And I think this is getting to, you know, what I was talking about earlier, where Sam Esmail wanted this episode to feel whimsical, and it's clearly, like, wonder that Tyrell's last moments are filled with.
I don't know about whimsical is the correct word. I think it might have been more... It's almost like... It was almost like he was in a delirious state.
Like dreamlike.
It was very dreamlike.
Okay.
Very, very dreamlike. The thing I struggled with this is I thought it was a beautiful send-off for Wellick. It was a great ending for him. And it made me feel bad that the character was gone because I love the character.
Yeah, he's great.
But then I was like, this guy is the biggest mass murderer in the history of humanity. And he's getting a better send-off than Shayla, Angela, Cisco.
Ugh.
Like, great send-off, right? And it's like, this guy should be
That's
hated.
so funny. That's so funny.
And I thought that was like an interesting way Sam Esmail was toying with our emotions. Another thing was, when it was clear that Wellick was going to die, you know, Mr. Robot says to Elliot, Jesus, we can't just leave him here. We can't let him die. And all Elliot can muster to say is, I can't just let you die.
Yeah.
I think it was more like, this is Elliot in his head knowing he's going to die. There's nothing we can do. We don't have cell service.
Exactly.
We don't have a vehicle. I guess the van doesn't work. We don't know where we are. And I don't know how to help him. But I feel like I have to say something. That was his best version of saying goodbye. And that was Wellick's version of saying goodbye. I'm gonna go take a walk.
Ugh.
You know, and I think that was like the best that they both could muster. Because in reality, they're not friends. Elliot doesn't care for him on that level, but he cares for him as a human being. Like, you're here, and I just don't want this to happen, but I also know it's going to happen.
I cannot believe he's dead. What the hell?
Yeah.
That was not what I was expecting. I literally was like, no, what? And then he looks at a blue light. I was like, what's happening?
yeah.
I did not understand. I was like, are you guys fucking with us? What is this? And I was like, this is super metaphorical. I like don't get it, but okay. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I didn't understand even like all the way back to the gunshots. Like, it didn't look like he was shooting that way, like, or shooting through that window. I didn't catch that right away because I only watched it once. Maybe he did. Yeah, he did shoot. He shot twice towards Elliot, and then he shot another one while Elliot was ducking down on the other side. Mm-hmm. So it must have been Wellick. And then obviously he shot himself. Also, this might be getting ahead. Did we not see in the preview for this episode that the whole thing was on fire? They were both looking at that same truck on fire.
Oh, you know what? I think that's the trailer, I think, more for the season. Yeah. But it was with Wellick.
It was with Wellick, though. It was Wellick and Mr. Robot. No, yeah, Wellick and Mr. Robot, I think, looking inside a van and it was burning.
And that's sure it was Wellick?
It was definitely Wellick.
It was Wellick. That's why I was waiting for that scene. Because that whole episode, I was going into that, thinking about that scene from the preview, and I was like, okay, what is going to happen? Because that made sense to me, that he was filling up the gasoline tank. I was like, yeah, they're going to light the whole thing on fire. They're going to watch it burn together. But that scene never came. So what the hell's happening?
Theory. What if we see Wellick, like, appearing as a vision or, like, a hallucination in the next episode when they actually do have to get rid of the van?
Yeah.
So
I definitely don't think this is the last we see of Wellick.
Yeah.
Whether it's him actually alive, probably not, but I think he'll come back, the actor, in some capacity.
I don't get the reasoning for killing him off, story-wise.
Oh, I actually think it's really important story-wise.
I think it's important story-wise, but it's a very interesting choice. Because, like, obviously, like, him being dead now, if he is dead, that throws everything for a loop in terms of him being CEO.
Yeah, White Rose's plan is fucked.
It's fucked. So now they have to all come together. Although, okay, so going back a little bit, White Rose says, install him as CEO, right? Tell him it's from White Rose. Does that mean they're no longer bringing everyone together in person?
No, they're going to install him as CEO and then have the Days Group get together. And Wellick, as the new CEO, will probably join the Days Group and, you know, be informed of everything and how things work, and then, you know, follow their directions of how to do things.
I guess I don't understand that, because in that previous episode, like second episode, the whole point of getting the Days Group together was to vote on the new CEO, because White Rose told Phil Price, like, you know that we can't get a new CEO unless we all vote on it together in person. But then he says install him as CEO without a vote. So I guess I don't understand.
Oh, no, it wasn't. I don't know if it was that. I think it was more like, we're going to install him as CEO. They didn't have any candidates.
Or like at least put him forth as a candidate, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's what they're doing. They're putting him forth as a
gotcha.
candidate. And they're going to say, well, I think they need someone to accept. They're going to tell, well, you're going to do what we say.
Right.
And then you're going to accept this nomination. And then Philip Price can, you know, fuck off and do whatever he wants. But now they don't have a candidate. And so, yeah, I'm not sure what's going to happen now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't know. I guess I'm super confused for that reason because of the preview. So I just don't know where that's going to come in or what that mean. Was that a mistake? Or I don't know what that was.
Well, maybe let's talk about what I thought you were trying to get to. Maybe let's talk about why did Sam Esmail choose to get rid of Wellick?
Yeah.
Because it sounds like his story, I mean, obviously he felt like maybe his story couldn't go on any further. And that's why he did that.
Because I thought they would have been a great tag team. He would be very good. It would be like if this whole played out, he was CEO. That's a huge benefit to both of them to get him inside. And they, in the sense like they did burn everything, it didn't get out to Dark Army. They're in the clear, and they would have had a really good upper hand. So now it's kind of throwing them both for a loop. I don't know what that choice was or why he did that.
I just personally think that they built a story without Wellick in it, and this was otherwise a natural close to Wellick's character and his usefulness. Where I totally see where you're saying, like, it could have been really interesting to see him as CEO and using that position to change the dynamics of how the events play out. But at the same time, Wellick is a puppet, right? He really doesn't have the power to really do anything. And Dark Army really wouldn't allow that to happen. And clearly they were, you know, listening in and would have found out that he was not being truthful and transparent. So I think that he really wouldn't have had that power, even though that's the title that he was given. And so this was otherwise a natural close to his character, similar to Angela, where Angela wasn't going to be able to do too much this last season. And so they had to write in her death.
Yeah.
So who is going to be the new CEO then?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, this is a pretty big problem for White Rose.
It has to be someone we already know, right? Or do you think they would bring in somebody else?
Well, see, here's the thing. It's Christmas Day. The meeting's supposed to happen on Christmas Day.
I think so,
right?
yeah.
They're probably going to be searching for hours trying to find Wellick. They're not going to know he's dead. They just know that, you know, the last location was off in the woods, and they have no idea where he is after that. So that's going to kill a lot of time. And so I think the next episode is going to be very frantic. Them trying to figure that out. So I actually don't know how that's going to play out.
Do you think... I forgot what happened to Terry Colby.
Terry Colby's on a book writing tour. Like, he's promoting his book, The Last Honest Man.
He's alive, right?
Yeah, he's alive.
That'd be kind of cool.
That'd be interesting.
I always liked him as a character. He was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's going to have much bearing anymore. Like, is that still really important to know who's CEO, or is it now more important to have, like, the meeting, to focus on the meeting?
Well, the whole point of the meting was to install a new CEO, so...
Right. But does it matter anymore who's CEO, I guess? To the storyline.
Well, the guy... I mean, they have... Well, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so that was basically the end of the Tyrell, Elliot, and Mr. Robot storyline.
Yeah.
And to talk about, you know, the scenes of the episode I really did enjoy, it was...
Maybe let's go to DDP, because that one's a little quicker, and then we'll end on Darlene, because that one's most entertaining.
Yeah. So it cuts to DDP, and she's lonely as ever. She's trying to get off on a recording of Darlene when she was being held in the FBI. And then she starts chatting on IRC and invites the girl over, which I always, you know, even watching the episode, I was like, come on.
Yeah.
Is is DDP really going to be that dumb? Because that's a dangerous thing for anyone to do.
Right, exactly.
But anyways, the girl comes over, and initially it seems like a normal date, but then the girl ends up being Dark Army, and she is choking her underwater. And what the girl says is, give up control, realize you'll never be free. And we see DDP struggling in the beginning, but I think we see like a quick moment where she actually just lets go. But then we see her taking a full breath of air, that she actually hasn't died. She's actually survived this drowning. And
Well, she doesn't take a breath of air. She's still underwater, but she opens her eyes and is very, very calm. And then she wakes up. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, what do you guys think of this?
Well, did you guys suspect it was a dream?
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
I always realized it was not a dream, but I realized it wasn't real as soon as she opened the bathroom.
Mm.
I was like, this is off. Like, this is not real.
Yeah. There were some odd things, like, why does she have a bottle opener in the freezer? I was like, what? That was weird. And on the rewatch,
Ducati.
you had Takati. You got one single
New
Takati.
Jersey.
Yeah. There was something on the rewatch that was interesting. You actually see her fall asleep after she messages the guy. And so I guess that was probably a signal that, it was a dream. Because she clearly was asleep. But I just didn't catch that the first time. Swetha had a great catch in that this is the same story that she tells
Right.
Angela when she's first trying to kind of get her to come to her for help.
Mm-hmm.
When she says, I always have this recurring dream, this beautiful woman coming over, and it starts out great, but then ends badly with her trying to drown me in the bathtub. But it's only when I let go and stop struggling when I'm free.
She doesn't say free. We talked about, we
Right.
actually went and rewatched because we were curious to see
What she said exactly.
And it was episode 2, season 9. And the story
Season 2. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I was like, damn, there's 9 seasons.
Season 2, episode 9.
Yeah.
And the story is exactly how it plays out. Except for the moment right at the end of their conversation where DDP tells Angela, in this dream, when I finally stopped struggling, I survived. So not quite, I'm free, I survived.
Right. And so this is something that Swetha and I kept going back on. Did the dream change with the Dark Army aspect? Obviously with the mask, that's new.
Yeah.
And by me more in terms of the ending. Because before it sounds almost not a positive dream, but more like, if you kind of stop struggling, things are better. But in this instance, it's like, stop struggling because you will never be free. You will always be like this.
Yeah, stop fighting back.
Yeah. And so I thought it was a little bit of a different take. And so I'm curious if her dream has been altered now that Dark Army is interjected and that she needs to accept that this is her life and that's it.
Definitely.
Which makes perfect sense now, right? We've known all along that she feels like trapped by the Dark Army. She's obviously scared and paranoid. What I don't get is why she was having this dream beforehand. Like, why in season 2 would she be having a dream where...
I think she's always just been very dark and depressed. And I think that was just, like, adding to her character development as a person.
I was wondering, like, in terms of aspects of her character... is it the fact that she's gay and, felt trapped by who she is, and she was fighting against it, and then when she realized, like, if she stops struggling, she can actually survive and, make a new life? Because, yeah, like, I think now that I'm thinking about it, in that scene where she's with White Rose and he's showing her all the dresses and opening up to her, she talks about the fact that she was supposed to marry someone, right? A guy?
Yeah.
No,
right?
It was a girl, and they were dating, and then she proposed, and then she went out the back entrance of the
Was it
restaurant.
really a
She just
girl?
basically ran away. Yeah.
I didn't know that. That was a guy.
Pretty sure it was a girl. Yeah.
Huh. Interesting.
That's the only thing that I can think of that really makes sense. Obviously, we don't know everything about DDP, and she might have some other things that are haunting her and making her feel oppressed, but...
I don't know if it's oppressed because, her mom is
Exactly.
totally accepting
Right.
and even encouraging, trying to set her up on
Yeah.
dates. So I don't think the relation. I think the main
I mean,
lack
it's
of a
many,
relationship.
many years later now, right?
Right. I think the lack of. I think she's lonely. At the end of the
Yeah.
day, she's insanely lonely, and it's compounded by the fact that she's owned by this terrorist organization.
But
Yeah.
but I'm talking about season 2. Like, why would she have this dream back then? This is a recurrent nightmare for her. And what is it about DDP back then that made her feel? And I disagree with it. I really do think it's oppressed. And she feels like she's struggling against something that doesn't fit in line with who she is. And I don't know what that would have been for her back then.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, if we're going off of that, like, maybe she wishes she wasn't gay or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really know what that detail was, other than, like, maybe they knew they were going to have the scene later on. But I still don't get the significance, I guess, of it.
Of her having this dream again.
Yeah.
Well, that's getting to one of, the things that we were talking about earlier. I don't really see how the scene was really necessary.
Yeah.
I don't really know how much insight we get, and I think I disagree with Sid a bit, where he thought that the point of this scene is to show that DDP's like further on the breaking point, to the point where she's desperate to do something. But I think a few points go against that. The fact that this is a recurrent nightmare, where this isn't the first time she's had a nightmare like this. And she's clearly been on the verge of doing something drastic and crazy. She just feels like, I don't see how this particular nightmare would have changed her mind about that.
So that's where I disagree, and that's what I was kind of driving at. I think this dream has changed since the whole Dark Army aspect. I think, and the reason I say that is when she wakes up, her reaction to the dream was strange.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like she was like, "Oh shit, not that dream again." She had this like almost quizzical look, like, "Whoa, that was different." And I think the dream has changed. I think the way it ended was different than what she previously said. When the Dark Army girl says, "You'll never be free. Stop struggling. This is your life, basically." I think that was a little bit different than how the previous dream ended. And so I think this is a different dream. I think it was a new dream, and I think that's what her reaction was.
To actually counter that and give a different perspective on it, going back to that season 2 dream, maybe something really drastically changed in that moment in her life when she had this nightmare the first, or maybe like that time around, where let's take the example that she was really struggling with the fact that she was gay and, was really struggling with that. Maybe she had this nightmare and then she's like, fuck it, I am who I am and this is the life I'm going to live.
Exactly.
And she stopped struggling with that internal demon. And this time around, it's been killing her to be under Dark Army's thumb. And maybe she has this nightmare and then she realizes, fuck it, I can't keep living like this.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to do this anymore.
Yeah, I think the purpose of the dream and the story she was giving Angela was like acceptance.
Yeah.
It's a concept.
Yeah, stop.
it,
And she says it to
That's kinda
Angela
cool.
earlier in.
Okay, I see that.
I think the previous episode when she first talks with Angela at her desk, and she says, "You're not being who you are."
Mm-hmm.
It was very obvious to her, and I think it's further reinforced. Like, stop trying to pretend to do something you're not, and be someone you're not. I think that was the point of that story. Like, I accepted who I was, and it was okay. I was okay after that. But in this instance, I think Dark Army's trying to get her to go against her better nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like basically go fight against that, suppress that feeling, and just do what we tell you to do.
Exactly.
I think that's why the dream changed, and that's when she was like, I think maybe that dream is actually maybe in a way been a positive reinforcement for her, and now it's been twisted into something that's not great, but it's also a reflection of her life right now. And I think that could be a catalyst for her.
I mean, it's always been a dark dream, so it's not. I actually don't think the dream has changed all that much. But like you said, I think it is a catalyst for her.
Yeah, I agree.
Also, I don't know if shows even do this, but there's another scene from the preview that I was expecting to be in this episode that wasn't, and I was waiting on as well. In the preview for this episode, we see Darlene, looks like she's standing over someone or like talking to someone who's like sitting down, and she's like, "I need your help, and I don't know who else to turn to." She said something along those lines, and I remember even discussing it. We were like, "Oh, she's definitely talking to DDP. Like, she's going to go to DDP for help." But we don't get that scene at all in this episode. So maybe they did a mixture for the preview of like this past week's episode and the next week's.
I think so. I think I do remember that scene. That might have been the very first preview of the
We
season.
gotta rewatch the preview for this episode.
Because the first preview we
Honestly,
get...
I'm curious.
Yeah, the first preview we get is actually a preview for scenes throughout the whole season.
Mm-hmm.
And then the preview for this week, yeah, I think, yeah, it might be worth rewatching. I think there were some missing scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think Siddha's right that I remember exactly what scene you're talking about, and I think we will get that scene later on. For whatever reason, though, the trailer made it seem like it was for this episode, and I think it was more for the whole season.
Okay.
But yeah, okay. Now that we've talked about that, I'm kind of accepting that storyline a little bit more. I think if this is a turning point for DDP, I think I understand kind of her role in this whole episode a little bit more.
Obviously, a lot of this episode was very subtle.
Yeah,
It was
very
not
subtle.
about, putting up a sign saying, this is what we're doing with the story. It was almost very subtle shifts in the storyline, like the wind slightly directing us towards certain things.
Yeah. Okay, well, now to get to my favorite part about the episode. Darlene and Tobias.
Tobias.
But before we get there, we see Darlene in the middle of the street just yelling at Elliot in a voicemail. She chooses not to leave him.
Such a great voicemail.
Yeah.
But basically she's just so frustrated with him, and, she... Basically what we were talking about earlier, Elliot's really made her feel like shit. Like, that he doesn't care about her, and that she's doing this all for nothing. And he has stood her up because he's in the woods, which Darlene hasn't figured out yet. But Darlene lets us know that Olivia's access is not enough, and they have to break into virtual realty in order to get into the Deus's bank account. And I actually think that jumping to the trailer for the next episode, I actually think the next episode is them breaking into virtual realty.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, then she goes to Elliot's apartment and realizes that, he's missing. He's like in the middle of the woods somewhere. And she's on the street trying to steal a car when Tobias finds her. And he's like, "What are you doing? You're stealing!"
Very good Tobias impersonation.
And I recognized him instantly from Parks and Rec because he was a hilarious character on Parks and Rec.
Jeremy Jam.
Jeremy Jam.
I don't really remember him, but I only watched a few episodes of Parks.
He was really, really funny in that too. He's just an amazing actor, and I thought he was equally funny in this episode. Darlene offers to drive Tobias if she can use his car for a bit later on, essentially to search for Elliot and find him. And Tobias has some great lines, like when they finally get to his house and there's his car. Darlene's like, "Okay, like that's your car. Whose car is this?" And Tobias is like, "Christmas, huh?" Like he doesn't even think twice about it. He just kind of gets out of the car and walks towards his house. And, I thought this was just a really creative and clever way of showing how, in Darlene's mindset, everything that Tobias is saying is really, really dark. And
yeah.
But it
it's
was
suicidal.
dark. Like, I totally was, on the same page as her. I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, this guy is, about to, do something drastic.
Yeah.
Another line I really liked is when... what was it? Like, goodbye is final or something like that?
Yeah. Goodbye is short for something. Yeah.
It's short and final. I think it's goodbye is short and final.
Yeah.
And
She's
Tobias is
"Jesus."
like, "That's Steinbeck. Read a book." And she's like, "What are you talking about? You're talking about your wife is dead." And he's like, "My wife is dead?" Just complete miscommunication the whole car
She
ride.
threw out her bag. She had an accident.
Yeah, I thought it was really, really well written, and I really, really enjoyed their conversation. And I think that this was a huge moment of character development for Darlene, where she really cares about this other person who's not, remotely related to her, where she's really worried about him. She's like, "I don't want you to do anything," and she kind of goes out on a limb to try to help him. And in this moment, she also opens up, talking about everyone that she's lost, and
Sorry, I was thinking about his response.
Yeah. Okay.
Dolly,
She's kind of like,
Darling.
oh, Dolly.
It was great, man. It was. I thought the same thing. I think we all thought the same thing. It was intentional misdirection that this guy was going to commit suicide. And he's lonely. He's actually a very happy, well-adjusted person. He's very good. He just likes helping children on Christmas Eve. But it was all a mirror reflection for Darlene. She's thinking about her brother, really worried about Elliot, and she sees that everywhere. She's projecting it everywhere. And again, this is cool. We talked about in previous podcasts how Darlene puts up this front, and she finally let down that front and was very open and honest, and she needed to get that out. She needed to get that out to anybody. You know, she was that like bursting to talk about it. And I think he gave her decent advice. You have to worry about yourself, and I hope your brother's not dead, you know.
Yeah.
And she's like, you know, I'm trying, but she needs to be with her brother. She needs to find him. She needs to make sure he's okay. And I thought it was great the way it was done, because as she's coming to that realization that as much as Ellie drives her crazy, she will always worry about him. She'll always care about him, whether, as much as it kills her. And that's her brother. That's all she has left. And she needs to help him. And at the same time, Elliot has that realization. It's like, I know we're going to die, more than likely. I have to protect my sister. I've been such an asshole. I got to do at least one good thing to help her out. I thought that was cool. And so whenever they do reconnect, they're going to be at totally different places. That's going to be so much better for both of them in their relationship moving forward.
I took it a totally different way because I wasn't really understanding the scenario. Like, as she was driving on, and then she kind of stops and starts breaking down, crying.
Yeah, afterwards.
And my first thought was, oh, she's going to turn around and go back to New York City. Because, like, it was coming off of the comment from Tobias saying, like, you need to worry about yourself first.
Right.
And I was thinking, like, you know, like, she's like, yes, I love my brother so much, but this is, like, taking such a toll. Like, I can't go after him every single time that he has an episode, or that he, like, just, you know, is having a hard time or whatever it might be. Like, I need to, like, take care of my own sanity as well. I thought she was going to go back. Or if she wasn't going to go back, I thought she was going to, like, pick up Tyrell on the way or something and, like, run into him. Many different things. But yeah, that was my kind of thought. I don't know if that's... Because I didn't understand why she was crying. It wasn't in line with, like, a realization and, like, kind of, like, a sense of calm, knowing, like, yes, like, we're always going to be... It's just always going to be us, and that's all that matters, you know? It felt more like an exhaustion. I
think exhaustion, and also the way I took it was she didn't know where to go. Like, where am I supposed to go? Like, she has that one GPS coordinate, which was when you lost signal at that Stop and Shop. And I think that's where she was trying to drive to. But it's just kind of like, what am I going to do when I get there? Where is he? Why did he leave? What's going on? Like, why was there a note saying they're listening at his apartment? Why was the apartment door broken? It's like so many things happening. And they have to break and hack into virtual reality within the next, like, I don't know,
24 hours.
24
Not
hours,
even 24,
less than that.
Less than that.
It's just like so much. It's too much for her. And she needs him, and they need each other.
Yeah.
What's funny was when I first watched it, I thought she was driving upstate to go to DDP. I thought she was trying to go to her. I thought DDP was still at her mom's house. But maybe now she's going to go to DDP because she has no idea where Elliot is.
So you guys do think she's going to turn around?
Well, she was driving towards New York.
Oh, she was?
Yeah, I think the sign said like 116 miles to New York, right? I thought she was driving.
Oh, so she had already turned around and was heading back.
I think so. Maybe that's why she stopped and cried, because she's like, I can't just leave him, maybe. Or, I don't know.
I didn't realize that. I thought she was still, like, on her way, like, dropped him off and still going.
But yeah, they were just hilarious scenes with Tobias. He really crushed it.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the episode. I mean, I don't know. I think I agree when he says that it's just going to be jam-packed, like, after this. There's not going to be any lulls or, like, slower episodes, so. Yeah,
the preview for next week, we can talk about a little bit. Clearly, it's the hack, or breaking in. You know, you see Darlene with a wig, and Elliot and her working together, trying to break into virtual reality. And you see a quick scene of DDP with her phone and a timer going off, and she's looking very panicked. So I wonder if DDP is working with them, and it's part of the plan.
Mm-hmm.
I forget. I think we see some other people. I forget who we see. But those are like the key ones I saw.
Right.
It looks like they're very, very frantic, running around the building, trying to, accomplish this plan.
Mm-hmm.
Virtual
Excited.
reality is a nice play. That's a very tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked it. No, I didn't.
Well, I was thinking about it again, and I think everyone was talking about how the cinematography was so beautiful this episode.
Yeah.
I honestly feel like they were trying too hard. I think one of the reasons I liked the episode in Sopranos so much, where they're lost in the snow and just walking around, it's very unassuming. It's like a great episode, but it's very unassuming. I actually think that this episode missed the mark a little bit for me because they were trying too hard. They wanted it to be like this really beautiful and meaningful episode.
I don't know. I think it's hard to compare that to the Pine Barrens episode in Sopranos. And Hardy, I know you haven't watched Sopranos. Basically, the premise is this two characters, Polly and Chrissy, they were tasked to go collect money from this Russian guy who owed them money. And I guess he didn't have the money. And his place looked like shit. It was like just a mess. And he didn't have the money. And I think they attacked him or something, or trying to kill him, and they're going to go dump his body off in the woods. But then he actually was alive and
shit.
runs off.
Very similar episode in
Okay.
terms of
Yeah,
the
so they're
parallels.
searching for him throughout the woods, and they just can't find him. And
Yeah.
they're just getting super cold, and they're eating
Right.
ketchup packets for food.
Shit.
And it's more funny because they get a call from their boss, Tony Soprano, and the connection is really bad. And he's trying to say, dude, you got to find this guy. He's super dangerous. He worked for the interior defense of the Russian ministry. But the connection's going in and out. So all he hears is like interior and something with a D. And so he tells Chrissy, he's like, this guy was an interior designer. Like, we got to find this guy. And then Chrissy's like, this place looked like shit.
That's so funny.
It was like a super funny scene. So it was a lot more comical. The look the feeling they were going for, because it was just like a ridiculous scenario where they couldn't find this guy. They clearly shot him a bunch of times, and he's like sprinting through the
But
woods.
he still like survives somehow.
Yeah.
Right.
And then he's like, if they have to be careful because if they stumble on him, he'll kill them. Like,
Right.
kind of similar to what happened.
Yeah, so
Terrible
it was a little bit more comical. While this one was a little bit more melancholy and serious. But yeah, I if you think that, I thought it was really great. I thought it was really.
It was
well
definitely
done.
theatrical. That was the vibe I was getting from just like that scene. It was theatrical, like dreamlike. It was
Yeah.
definitely going for a certain vibe. And like whenever you do something like that, it's very stylistic. I think there's always going to be
Yeah, it's going to be
hit or miss.
divisive.
Yeah.
I think we already talked about impact for the story with Wellick
Mm-hmm.
disappearing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we're going to talk about that anymore. So we have some listener feedback.
Oh,
We
do
can
we?
get
First
into-
time. I'm so excited.
It's from the previous podcast.
Thanks for listening, guys.
So we have some questions.
Ready?
It's kind of like a stream of different thoughts. So I don't know the context of some of these. I'll just kind of.
Sid is really surprising us with this one.
What do you mean?
He didn't tell us about these questions ahead of time.
Yeah, I sent these.
No, I didn't think so.
Are these your own questions?
No, this is from a friend.
He's really getting into the method acting.
This is from a friend of the podcast, Bam Bam.
Woo
Right?
woo.
So he asked, I'm not sure the context of this. What if there are two Darlenes? Like how Elliot has a Mr. Robot. She has her own version too. And that's the one who's done the crazy shit and communicating with Elliot at times. It's why Elliot sometimes doesn't know who she is, like when he tried kissing her in season 1. It's like something we've talked about, like a
Mhm.
Mrs. Robot. If like Elliot or
Right.
Angela had one, maybe Darlene has one. I think anything's possible at this point. Probably a little late to bring that up now, but I don't know. What do you guys think about that one?
I also think probably the reason Elliot didn't recognize Darlene was more Elliot's damaged mind and
Correct.
Elliot being, the one that was lost in that situation, rather than Darlene having a Mrs. Robot.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it'd be interesting to have had that maybe earlier on in
Yeah.
the series if Darlene also happened to have some issues or seeing someone as well. I don't think that's super likely now.
And it would be hard to pull that off at this late stage in the series.
Just to play devil's advocate, but this is more in relation to Elliot. Sam
Yeah.
Esmail has said the clues have been there from the very first pilot episode
I
about
have
their.
not seen it.
Yeah, you've been
I've not
rewatching
seen
it, right?
I don't know what he's talking about. And like, I think it is interesting that you brought up the whole, you know, the placement in each scene that they leave a space for a third person.
Yeah.
I think that's been there, but I haven't seen any like concrete evidence in terms of the demeanor or change in personality or anything like that would suggest otherwise.
This is a tangent, but going to what we were talking about earlier with the healing of Elliot, that seems like a theme for this season, getting him to be whole again. I was talking to Sweta after we watched the episode. I keep going back that it's interesting that the very first time we're introduced to Elliot, in the very first episode, he's completely alone. And as far as he knows, he has no family, one friend, Angela, and Shayla, you know, at that point she's more of like just a neighbor and gives him drugs and stuff. And majority of the time he's crying in his apartment alone, just like the pain and depression is just like unbearable, right? And he's seeing a therapist. I think he stopped taking his drugs. I think that's when the show starts. Like I think he just stopped, right? And that's when maybe he starts hallucinating. I don't know. And like his only thing that helps him move forward and have any purpose is he uses his hacking skills to take down people he think are doing bad things, like the Ron's coffee guy. And then he has this mindless job he works at with Allsafe, which is just something he needs to do to pay the bills. I think it's really interesting that Sam Esmail chose that point to introduce us to Elliot. A very broken, maybe the most broken version of Elliot, because his memory is completely altered at that point. And I have to think there's something significant about that.
Yeah, that's really interesting to think about. And I hope we get an explanation for how Elliot ends up in that mind frame at the beginning of the series. Because he had only seen Darlene maybe like a year or two before, and he completely doesn't remember. And in the scene that we get, that flashback to that Halloween scene, he clearly knows who she is.
Yeah.
And so between that time and the start of the series, he completely doesn't remember who Darlene is anymore. And you're absolutely right. He feels like he is completely alone. It's interesting, though, you know, we talked about the fact he does remember that he lost his father to E-Corp.
Yes.
He just doesn't remember what his father looks like and kind of who he was in his life. But he does remember that specific detail.
And I think, to your point, probably the only reason he remembers that detail is because he remembers Angela. And he sees Angela all the time. And Angela shares that same memory and connection.
Yeah, definitely.
That's probably the only reason why that still exists.
So I never, actually, my roommate was talking to me about this. She asked me, is Elliot taking his meds for, I don't know, you said he has schizoaffective disorder. Is he taking meds for that, or is he not? Which is why he's seeing people.
He's definitely not. So Sam Esmail has talked about, he has actually like multiple mental illnesses. And the big one Sam Esmail has talked about is dissociative identity disorder, which is multiple personality disorder. And you can take antipsychotics to help suppress these other personalities or these hallucinations that he's seeing. He has clearly chosen not to. He stopped taking his meds. There was a brief period of time where he was taking Zoloft. He talked about, I don't know if you guys remember, it was like, there was an episode where he was doing the same thing every day.
Yeah.
He would wear, I think when he was working for E-Corp, where he was like doing his best to like fit in.
Yeah.
Where he was like, take a Zoloft, feel fine.
Chunk Club.
Chunk Club.
Exactly. And that was the brief period of time where we saw him on meds at all.
Don't you think that's bizarre though? Like he's seeing a psychiatrist who is supposed to be monitoring him and making sure he's good in terms of also taking meds. Don't you think she'd be like, you should be on like a whole regimen?
I think he was lying to her. I think he was telling her he was taking it. Okay. I think she asks him, "How are you taking your medicine?" He says yes, and then he says to us no. Okay. I think that was confirmed earlier.
Yeah, definitely. She would want him to be on medication, but he's just not taking them.
Why? I wonder why.
Yeah, I mean, that's real. We wouldn't have this whole series if he was on medication, probably.
That's true. I think like he says, he likes seeing Mr. Robot, and but I think that's very, I don't know enough about it.
Well, at that point, he didn't know Mr. Robot even existed.
Correct, but now that he knows, he tells Krista, he's like, I like having him around. It's like it's not as lonely as he would be if he just knew he was just by himself, you know. someone to talk to, someone to confide in, as well as with us.
I don't know if we're ever going to get it, but I would love to know what happened and see those scenes from that Halloween episode up until when we first introduced him in May. So that time frame, what happened to cause him to lose his memories?
Yeah,
and
correct.
And just like forget everything.
Yeah.
And become this person who's insanely depressed,
It
even
feels
more than
like-
before. Because he seemed like he was okay when he saw Darlene. He was just like, yeah, got fired, you know, you have to see a therapist for
Yeah.
anger management, you know.
They're like even joking around to a point. Yeah, I mean, I don't, to what Bam Bam said about Darlene and maybe a Mrs. Robot or Miss Robot, I don't think it's that, but I do strongly feel there's something about Darlene and like the timing of her coming into Elliot's life and so on and so forth. Even Elliot saying in his own words to Krista, like, I can't speak to Darlene, she's a trigger for me. Things like that.
Yeah.
I think there is something about her and her presence, and I still can't put my finger on it. I haven't gone back and watched that episode, but I have a strong belief that that family picture did not have her in it, and it was something that was weird, or she was in it only after the fact. When he first was looking at it, she wasn't there, and then she was there. So there's something about her, and like in relation to her being his sister, and him remembering her, there's something off about that. That if there is like this third personality, clearly that third personality did not want Elliot to remember her for a certain reason, whatever that is, and her being in his life has maybe suppressed that third person.
I think that's really interesting. It could be very true because there really is no reason for Elliot to want to suppress Darlene, actively. And I don't see any reason why Mr. Robot would want that.
Right.
Because at that time, he's actually working with Darlene
Exactly.
to do the 5-9 hack. Elliot doesn't know that, but Mr. Robot, maybe he just shut down that version of Elliot to better function because he knew Elliot would not want Darlene involved. Mm-hmm. That could be a possibility to protect him.
That's a possibility. Mm-hmm.
But there could be this third personality who took charge and made this happen.
And like you were saying, how Angela was telling Darlene, like, none of this, he didn't start acting like this until you decided to come back into town. Like, there's something that triggered, whether, like, between that October episode, where maybe that was, like, their first time meeting up or something, or I don't know, like, maybe the second time, and they're just, like, hanging out, doing their usual brother-sister stuff. But clearly from that point on, maybe a third person was activated or, like, recognized the situation and wanted to shut everything down. I don't know. There's something weird there for sure.
Yeah.
I think a very simplistic explanation is Darlene is the most concrete person or thing that links Elliot to his past.
Mm-hmm.
And clearly his past was very traumatic for him. Potentially the reason why all these personalities got created within him. And that would be, like, on the most simplistic level, like, why Darlene's a trigger for him.
Yeah, definitely.
So to the next question, what if Olivia is Elliot's other persona? Basically, was she real? Was that whole scenario where he kind of connected with her and opened up to her, did that actually happen?
I think so.
Yeah.
I do think so.
It was very out of character for Elliot to do that. Very out of character.
It was out of character, but it wasn't his choice either. I feel like Mr. Robot definitely hijacked the situation.
Yeah.
And he kind of had to go with it. And then when she left, he panicked a little bit. It's like, I already put all this work into it. Like, I only have one shot at this. And like you said, like, whenever he's doing things up until this past episode, his mindset was like, I need to save myself and my sister at no matter what cost and consequence. Like, if I have to do this, I'm going to do this all the way. Leading him to, like, go to her house and whatever and whatnot.
I don't know if this is what he meant, but it's taking it a different way. What
Mm-hmm.
if, this would be crazy, what if that third persona can personify and become whoever they want to be in front of Elliot? And so say, like, he goes to the bathroom, but Olivia is actually asleep the whole time. Mm-hmm. And then this personality shows up to interact with Elliot. Mm-hmm. And but really, the real Olivia was still asleep. I wonder if that's what Bam Bam's trying to get to. That wasn't him actually interacting with Olivia, but his third persona trying to get him to, do whatever he wanted him to do, heal or whatever.
Right. I think that'd be interesting. I think it would be difficult to present that, and get that idea across to us in the series.
what if the next time he sees Olivia, she doesn't remember that entire conversation? She's
Yeah,
like,
it
what
could
the hell are
be,
you talking
yeah.
about?
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's what he's driving at, but that could be interesting. And kind of leaning to what you're saying about how Mr. Robot hijacked the situation, more of a lighthearted thing. Bam Bam was curious if the pickup line would have worked on you guys.
What?
I think there was like a series of one, but the first one I remember was Elliot going up to her and says, "You're gonna want to sit down," and just like creepily staring at her.
Yeah.
And then, you know, obviously Mr. Robot stepped in and says, "I want to buy you a drink," and then says, you know, clearly you've been stood up on Christmas Eve, and you know, I'd like to make it up for all the assholes, other guys out there.
Yeah.
So I guess I don't know. Would the "you're gonna want to sit down" would that work?
Definitely not. Like, what the hell? Do I know you? I would have probably said the same thing. Like, do I know you or do you need something? No, but that the rest of the lines, I would have been curious, to say the least.
I think it probably, if it was me in that situation, it could have gone the way that it did, where I'm like, fuck it, it's Christmas Eve, like, let's just hang out. Or I probably would have been too embarrassed. I would have been like,
yeah,
I'm
he's
just
like
gonna go
calling
home.
me out.
Like,
Yeah.
I clearly was stood up, and he knows it, and you know, now I'm too embarrassed. Or maybe I would have even been like pissed. I've been like, oh my god, he's like trying to take advantage of the fact that I'm like vulnerable.
He's went next level there.
She's laying out all the scenarios for Bam Bam.
Yeah. And the last thing was more of a comment you had on your crockpot theory.
Oh, feedback. Direct feedback. Okay.
He liked it a lot, the Elliot twin theory.
In the womb.
In the womb. He said, what if it's like Heidi's favorite movie, Prestige, where it's like an unknowing type thing where there's two of them. And I don't know, maybe he's referring to Christian Bale and having physical twins, and we're not aware of it story-wise until the end.
Mm-hmm.
Could it be something like that, where they're constantly being interchanged?
I don't know if he has a physical twin, like a live twin in the show. I do feel like there's something we don't know more about their past. There is a lot of stuff we don't know about their whole family dynamic and how they grew up and what that situation was like at all. And it doesn't seem like either of them really like to talk about it. And Darlene's our only like source of legitimate information. And even she doesn't offer a lot. She only seems to like want to like talk about it if Elliot talks about things first. So that was why I was thinking like there is a possibility that Darlene knows that there was another like person in the Alderson family, but is no longer there anymore. But she doesn't want to bring it up because it's probably so traumatic for him. Same thing with like the snowman scene when they were talking about it near Coney Island, and she's like, "Oh shit! Like you want to talk about that?"
Yeah.
And he's kind of like, "Yeah, why wouldn't I? Like it's all good, right?" Yeah. So I can see it being a similar situation where she will not be the first person to bring it up, even though she has that information.
I agree with that. I mean, she's basically our Wikipedia for Elliot.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, but
very
there's
sassy Wikipedia.
Very sassy. Darlene.
Darlene.
Do you think this is gonna be a Lost situation where we're not gonna get answers for everything because in reality only certain things are really important to the story and those are things we should focus on? Or is Sam Esmail the type of person who wants to give us everything? Because so far he's been like that, where he's like he tries to answer everything. Sometimes his answers provide 20 new questions.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, obviously we have, 9 episodes left. And so, not a lot of time and still a decent amount of story left.
I personally think he's very detail-oriented, and he's going to do his best to answer most of the questions he's put out there.
I hope so.
I don't think there are that many questions to
Correct.
be answered either.
Yeah.
I think the two main things that I would be happy with if he answered was obviously who's the third person, and then lastly, what is the project? I think those are the two really big questions. I think there's not many other things that
I think that there are flashbacks we would love to see.
Yeah.
We were
That's
talking
true.
about, how we would love to see Elliot's dad and Angela's mom working on this project. How much did they know about it? How comfortable were they working on it? I think that would be a really interesting flashback. We might not get that.
Might not get that, yeah.
We were just talking about how it would be really cool to see how did Elliot end up in the place that he ended up at
Yeah.
the beginning of the series. That is really important, but we
I
might
do
not.
think so. Do you feel like we're gonna have another flashback? We do have 9 episodes. I think that's a lot considering how little we got with Game of Thrones. So that's like a
Yeah.
luxury. So do you think we're gonna get another flashback?
Did we have a flash? We didn't have a flashback this episode. Last episode we did. I think so. I think
What was the flashback again?
it was White Rose.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right.
Right. I think we're gonna get some form of some flashbacks throughout the remaining 9 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
I hope so, at least. I hope so. So I guess that's it. Should we wrap it up?
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for listening, guys.
Thanks for listening.
We'll upload
Feedback.
this.
Do you have more feedback?
Yeah.
We love questions.
Yeah.
That was really exciting.
Or comments
Yeah, we love all the feedback.
at tvsiblings@gmail.com. Right?
Yeah, tvsiblingspodcast@gmail.com. You can email us or just, text us, I guess. You guys know us. Thanks for listening, though. We'll upload this as soon as possible. And yeah, talk to you guys soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.